Chapter 23. Cats who live in a clan send out hunting patrols several times a day, Firestar explained, pausing at the end of the line of two-leg fences. And we patrol the borders twice, once at dawn and once at sunset. So, are we the Dawn Patrol? Boris asked.
Mouse brain,
his sister Cherry swiped at him with one paw.
Sky Clan doesn't have borders yet. We're hunters. Aren't we, Firestar?
That's right, Firestar meowed. We'll have borders soon, when I know the territory a bit better, and see how many cats are going to be living here. Meanwhile, this is Sky Clan's first proper hunting patrol. Cherry gave a happy little bounce.
Great! We haven't caught much, though,
she added, sounding disappointed.
I can't seem to pick up any scent at all.
That's because it's wet, Firestar told her. Even experienced hunters find it hard. Fog filled the gorge and stretched over the scrubland on the cliff top as far as the two-leg place. The rising sun shone through it with a milky light. Every grass stem was bent with the weight of water droplets, and dew misted on the cat's fur.
But that's no excuse for taking risks.
Scratch looked up from where he was digging up some fresh kill they had buried earlier.
I couldn't believe you two. You leaped straight into that garden without looking.
Sorry,
Cherry muttered, while Boris scrabbled his forepaws on the ground in front of him.
Sorry is all very well, snapped the rogue. You nearly landed right on top of that dog. If Firestar hadn't distracted it, you would be dog food by now. And you lost the squirrel you were chasing.
Boris sighed.
It was lovely and fat.
Scratch rolled his eyes and went back to scraping away the earth over their prey. Firestar gave him a quick glance. It was 4 days since Scratch and Clover had come to live in the caves, and Scratch's hunting skills were already proving useful. But he had no patience with the two kitty pets. They'll learn, Firestar meowed, and added to Cherry and Boris. You're coming along really well.
Can we come and live in the camp all the time?
Cherry begged. Not yet. Firestar was relieved the young cat was so keen to join the clan, but he wondered if she realized what a huge decision she was making. What about leaving your housefolk? Cherry's tail drooped, and her eyes grew more thoughtful.
I like sitting on a lap and being stroked, and I like playing with our housefolk and making them laugh. But I like hunting, too. I wish we could have both.
Well, we can't, mewed Boris. I worry about our housefolk missing us, too. If we could just tell them that we'll be okay. He took a deep breath. But if we are really descendants of the first Sky Clan, we belong in the gorge. Firestar blinked at him. I think you need to take your time before you make the final decision. Scratch had been right to scold them for dashing into the garden, even though he could have been more tactful. The kitty pet's biggest fault was charging blindly into things, but at least it showed they had courage, a valuable quality in a warrior.
How much longer? Cherry demanded. Can we be apprentices soon?
Before Firestar could reply, Scratch looked up.
Are we just going to stand around here? I want to be back in the gorge before the mist clears. I've never had anything to do with two legs, and I don't intend to start now.
Good thinking, Firestar meowed. Already the two-leg nests were standing out more clearly against the dawn sky, and he could hear a monster waking up in the distance. Bring your prey, and let's go. As he led the way across the scrubland, his jaws full of fresh kill and his ears pricked for any sound of danger, optimism swept over him. He was leading a patrol, taking prey back to a camp. For the first time since he left the forest, he felt as if he were really part of a clan. By the time they returned to the warrior's cave, the sun had burned off most of the mist. Even though the leaves were beginning to turn yellow, the gorge was still bathed in the heat of Greenleaf. Sandstorm was climbing the trail from the gorge. Her green eyes were sparking with annoyance, and the tip of her tail flicked. What's the matter? Firestar asked, setting down his fresh kill at the cave entrance. Sandstorm beckoned with her tail, so he took a few paw steps down the path to meet her, away from Scratch and the kitty pets.
It's Clover, she murmured when he was close enough to hear. I've been trying to teach her some fighting skills. She's a strong, healthy cat, She shouldn't have any problem. But can I make her see why she has to learn? Oh, you and Firestar are such good fighters. I know you'll look after us all.
Sandstorm let out a sigh.
She's keen enough to join Sky Clan, but just for protection. She's not interested in the warrior code, or what she might do for other cats.
Firestar narrowed his eyes. That could be difficult for her to learn right now, he mewed. It's natural for a queen to put her kit's safety first, and she must be pretty tired raising those 3 lively youngsters.
But at least she could try,
Sandstorm pointed out. She glanced down into the gorge where Clover was basking on a rock by the side of the pool, with her kits frisking around her.
Bounce and Rock and Tiny were trying to copy what I was showing their mother. Honestly, I think they learned more than she did.
Firestar pressed his muzzle against hers. It'll work out. She couldn't have a better teacher. Sandstorm gave him a sidelong glance and seemed to relax.
Let's go down to the river, she mewed. My paws could do with bathing.
Firestar's paws felt sore too, and as he followed Sandstorm down the stony trail, he longed to feel the cool, damp earth of the forest under his pads. A few fox lengths upstream, he could hear the excited squeals of Clover's litter. You know, those kits are almost ready to be apprenticed, he remarked as they stood in the shallows.
They must be nearly 6 moons old,
Sandstorm agreed, blinking against the sunlit dazzle on the water.
But we can't apprentice them until we find a few more mentors.
I'll ask Scratch and Clover if they know of any more cats, Firestar meowed. He broke off at the sound of voices calling his name from somewhere up above. Cherry and Boris were charging down the rock face, springing gracefully down sheer stretches of rock where Firestar and Sandstorm had to pick their way more cautiously.
Firestar!
Cherry panted as she sprang to the ground and pelted along the bank toward him.
We had an idea!
You mean I had an idea? Boris mewed, bouncing up to stand beside his sister. Cherry tried to shoulder him into the water, but Boris ducked away and swiped one paw over her ear. Cherry pounced on him, and the 2 kitty pets wrestled at the very edge of the river.
When you've quite finished, Sandstorm interrupted, maybe you'll tell us what your idea is?
The 2 young cats straightened up, looking embarrassed.
I guess apprentices don't do that,
Cherry muttered. Apprentices do that all the time, Firestar thought. I'm listening, he meowed. I thought you should have a meeting, Boris explained. His fur fluffed up with enthusiasm. We can tell all the cats who live near here to come, so you can tell them about the new clan. But we don't know any other cats, Firestar pointed out.
No, hang on,
Sandstorm meowed before Boris could reply.
I think it's a good idea. After all, we're looking for cats who can live together and cooperate with one another, so if they turn up to a meeting, they've already passed the first test.
I hadn't thought of that. Firestar waded out of the river, shook each paw in turn, and sat down on a sun-warmed rock. Right. Go on. Where do we find these cats?
We find them.
Cherry's green eyes sparkled.
We can pass the message on to all the other kitty pets. We'll go now if you like.
They'll all be outside on a day like this, Boris added. Firestar exchanged a glance with Sandstorm. Okay, he decided. We'll give it a try. But if we expect these cats to come to a meeting, they deserve to see who will be talking to them. I'm coming with you. Firestar peered down through a rustling screen of leaves into the 2-leg garden. He couldn't see much except for a stretch of grass and a few clumps of bright 2-leg flowers, but there was a strong scent of cat. Cherry and Boris were crouched on the branch below him.
Hey, Oscar,
Cherry called.
Come up here. We want to talk to you.
A moment later, Firestar spotted a muscular black tomcat racing across the grass. He launched himself into the tree with a magnificent leap. Sky Clan blood, Firestar thought as the newcomer balanced on the branch beside Boris and Cherry. What's going on? He asked. His whiskers twitched as he looked up at Firestar. Who's he? Firestar took a deep breath. My name's Firestar, he meowed, deciding not to confuse the black cat with details about the forest and Thunder Clan. That wasn't important now. Have you ever heard of Sky Clan, the cats who used to live in the gorge by the river? Oscar swished his tail. Nope, never heard of them. Cherry and Boris exchanged a glance. Cherry opened her jaws to reply, but Firestar silenced her with a flick of his ears. "But they've heard about you," Firestar went on. "And there are things you need to know about them. We're holding a meeting tomorrow night in the gorge, by the rocks where the river flows out. Will you come?" Oscar's eyes narrowed to brilliant green slits. He raised one paw and slid the claws out, contemplating them coolly. "Might not." Firestar bit back his frustration. He guessed Oscar was a bit of a show-off, but at the same time, this was a strong cat who would be a useful clan member. "You see, I'm trying to rebuild Sky Clan, and I'm looking for any cats who might be interested in joining." Oscar stretched his jaws wide in a yawn. "Why would I want to do that?" Not waiting for an answer, he jumped down from the tree and disappeared. "Come anyway! See what you think!" Firestar called after him. Cherry's neck fur bristled.
We should have known better than to ask him, she mewed. He's a real pain in the tail.
"Never mind," Firestar replied. "We have to ask as many cats as we can."
"Let's get on then."
Boris sprang impatiently to his paws. "I think we should talk to Hutch next."
Yes, let's.
Cherry's eyes gleamed, and she swiped her tongue over her whiskers.
His 2 legs give him cream.
The 2 kitty pets led Firestar along the fence of Oscar's garden and down into a narrow alley. Firestar's fur prickled as he remembered being lost in the other 2-leg place while he was looking for Sandstorm, but his 2 guides trotted ahead confidently. Before they had gone far, another cat appeared around the corner and halted with its pelt bristling, then relaxed as Boris and Cherry drew closer.
Hi, Bella,
Cherry greeted her.
Come and meet our new friend.
Firestar padded up to Bella, a pretty tabby and white she-cat with warm amber eyes. He was reminded of his sister Princess, who lived in the 2-leg place that bordered the forest. This cat didn't look as if she had Sky Clan ancestry. She didn't have the same powerful haunches as Boris and Cherry, and when she raised her paw to dab at a piece of dust on her nose, her pads were soft and pink.
Hello.
Bella dipped her head politely.
You're new around here. Where do your housefolk live?
Firestar doesn't have housefolk, Boris informed her. He's a clan cat. Bella's eyes stretched wide with curiosity, changing to wonder as Firestar briefly told his story.
You'll come to the meeting, won't you?
Cherry prompted when he had finished.
It'll be great, living in a clan. I'll show you how to catch mice.
Bella shook her head.
I couldn't possibly do that. I would miss my housefolk far too much, and they would miss me.
But, Boris began.
No,
Bella repeated more firmly.
The other night I got shut in the neighbor's shed, and when I got back, my housefolk's kits were wailing. I can't bear to think of them upset like that again.
She pressed her muzzle affectionately against Cherry's.
But I hope you enjoy living in this new clan, if that's what you want. Thanks, Bella.
Cherry looked unusually serious.
We'll come and visit you sometimes. I promise.
She watched as the she-cat trotted away down the alley.
I'll miss her, she muttered. She's a good friend.
Boris gave her ear a quick lick.
Come on, let's go and find Hutch.
At the other end of the alley, Cherry and Boris paused beside another fence. One of the wooden strips was broken at the bottom, leaving a space just wide enough for a cat to squeeze in.
We've got to be careful, Boris warned. Hutch's 2 legs have a dog as well. It should be shut up, but keep your eyes open.
Cherry had already pushed her way through the gap. Firestar followed warily while Boris brought up the rear. On the other side of the fence, Firestar found himself in a thicket of strong-smelling bushes. Beyond it, a stretch of grass led up to a path made of sharp little stones running around the 2-leg nest.
Hey, Hutch,
Boris yelled.
Are you in there?
Firestar stiffened as a flurry of barking came from the nest, but no dog appeared. Instead, a tiny door swung open in the big 2-leg door, and a dark tabby cat poked its head out. Spotting Cherry and Boris, he slid out the rest of the way, bounded across the stony path without flinching, and raced over the grass to meet them in the shadow of the bushes. He was not as powerfully built as Oscar, but he looked strong, and Firestar had noticed when he crossed the path that he had the hard pads that were a mark of SkyClan. He smelled strongly of kitty pet food.
"Hi,"
he meowed with a friendly flick of his ears to Firestar.
"My name's Hutch. What's yours?"
Once again, Firestar introduced himself and told the story of SkyClan. The SkyClan cats could live in the gorge because they had strong back legs for jumping and hard pads for walking over rock, just like Cherry and Boris. He felt a stirring of relief when Hutch raised one of his own paws to examine his pads. "We're holding a meeting to talk about it." Hutch looked intrigued.
"I've heard about cats living wild in the gorge," he told Firestar. "My mother used to tell me, but I thought they were just stories for kits." "No, it's all true,"
Boris mewed, and Cherry added enthusiastically,
"We're going to be SkyClan apprentices."
"So you'll come to the meeting?" Firestar asked. "Tomorrow night in the gorge where the river flows out."
"Sure,"
Hutch replied. Firestar dipped his head. "Then we'll see you there." Hutch flicked his tail in farewell and turned to go, then glanced back.
"Are you hungry?"
Cherry's ears pricked.
"Cream?"
she mewed hopefully, swiping her tongue around her jaws.
"A whole bowlful."
"Hang on," Firestar meowed before Cherry or Boris could move. "You can be a SkyClan apprentice, or you can go into two-leg nests and eat cream. Not both."
"But we're not apprentices yet,"
Cherry retorted pertly. Part of Firestar was amused, but he knew that if he gave his permission now, the two young kitty pets might never really appreciate what it meant to join a clan. If they weren't ready to give up two-leg comforts, they weren't ready to live the life of a warrior. "SkyClan or cream?" he meowed. "You choose." Cherry and Boris exchanged a glance, and Cherry let out a disappointed sigh.
"It's got to be SkyClan,"
she replied. "Freshkill tastes better anyway," Boris mewed. "Come on, we've got lots more cats to see." They plunged back into the bushes toward the fence. Firestar waited to say goodbye to Hutch and saw his own amusement reflected in the dark tabby's eyes. Suddenly he felt encouraged. This was a cat he could work with. Cherry and Boris led the way back into the alley and around a corner to the edge of a small thunderpath. Firestar paused by the fence, his neck fur bristling at the reek of monsters. One of them was crouched a few fox lengths away, but it seemed to be asleep. "It's okay," Boris meowed, strolling nonchalantly up to the edge of the thunderpath. "It's pretty quiet at this time of day." Cherry bounced up to join him. Firestar admitted to himself that he was impressed. These two kitty pets had a lot to learn about clan life and the warrior code, but here they were, confident and focused, and they seemed to know every paw step of the two-leg place. Trying not to show his uneasiness, he padded across to join them, glancing both ways along the thunderpath. No monsters were in sight, and he couldn't hear any approaching.
"Come on,"
Cherry urged. Firestar signaled with his tail, though he wasn't sure that the two young cats were waiting for his order. "Okay, let's go." All three cats darted across. Cherry and Boris swarmed up the nearest fence and balanced on the top, waiting for Firestar. "We can go along this fence," Boris explained. "We'll pass 2 or 3 gardens where cats live. Watch out for this next one, though. The two legs here have a dog."
"Noisy little brute,"
Cherry sniffed.
"It'll probably come out barking its stupid head off."
She was right. As soon as Boris set paw on the next section of fence, a small white dog shot out of the two-leg nest, yapping furiously. It sprang up at the fence, and Firestar dug his claws hard into the wood as it shook.
"Get lost, flea pelt,"
Cherry spat.
"Go and drool over your two legs. Don't worry,"
she added kindly to Firestar.
"The idiot can't climb."
Firestar felt as if he were the apprentice, and the two kitty pets were his mentors. "I'm fine with dogs, thanks," he meowed. The dog went on barking as the 3 cats continued along the fence top. Firestar hid his relief as the noise died away behind them. Eventually, Boris paused and looked down over a bigger garden than most of them, with a wide expanse of smooth grass bordered by masses of bright flowers. Firestar picked up a strong scent of cat. Cherry lifted her tail to point.
Over there.
She was pointing at some wooden two-leg thing standing at the edge of the grass in front of the flowers. Lying on top of it was a shapeless heap of cream and brown fur. Cherry jumped down from the fence, landing in a clump of flowers. Firestar and Boris followed and skirted the edge of the flower border until they reached the wooden two-leg thing. Two identical heads rose from the heap of fur. Firestar's ears pricked with curiosity. He had never seen cats like these before. Their slender bodies were cream-colored, but their legs, tails, ears, and muzzles were brown, and they had the most brilliant blue eyes he had ever seen. One of them let out a weird, high-pitched yowl.
Hi, Cherry. Hi, Boris. What do you want?
The other asked in the same strange voice. We've brought Firestar to meet you, Boris meowed. This is Rose and this is Lily, he added to Firestar, flicking his tail at each cat in turn. Greetings, Firestar began. He felt oddly hesitant. These cats couldn't possibly be SkyClan descendants. I've come to tell you about the cats who used to live in the gorge. The two cats listened to him in silence, their vivid eyes fixed disconcertingly on him. When he had finished, they turned the same intent stare on each other.
What do you think of that?
Rose asked.
Amazing,
Lily replied.
You will come to the meeting, won't you?
Cherry urged them.
It's going to be really great. What? Us?
Rose's eyes opened wide.
You're joking, of course. Us live in a cave with no warm blanket?
Lily added.
No creamed chicken? To chase mice and kill them?
Rose's tongue rasped delicately over one brown paw.
How vulgar!
Moving as one, the two cats rested their heads on their paws again and closed their eyes. Cherry exchanged a glance with Boris, who gave a tiny shrug.
Sorry,
she mewed to Firestar. It was worth a try. Don't worry, Firestar told him. He couldn't imagine these cats ever adjusting to the life of a clan, but in case they were still listening, he kept his thoughts to himself. Leaping back onto the fence, he was startled to see that the sun was starting to go down. They had spent most of the day in the two-leg place, and now he was ravenous. At the same moment, he heard a distant yowling from a two-leg several gardens away. That's one of our housefolk, Boris told him. We'd better be going. Sadly, he added, We'll miss them, you know.
That's not wrong, is it?
Cherry asked anxiously. No, Firestar replied, remembering his own pangs of homesickness. It's not wrong, but you have to choose. We've chosen, Boris meowed determinedly, while Cherry whisked her tail and added,
Come on, Firestar. We'll show you the best way out of here.
Padding back across the scrub land on his own, Firestar spotted movement underneath a thorn bush. Cautiously, he drew nearer and recognized the brown rogue who had frightened off the sparrow when he first arrived in the gorge. The cat was crouched over a piece of fresh kill and looked up suspiciously as Firestar approached. Hi, Firestar tried to sound friendly. Have you heard about the clan of cats who used to live in the gorge? The brown rogue gave a non-committal grunt and went on eating. Firestar couldn't be sure he was even listening as he told him about SkyClan and the meeting planned for the following night. What do you think? He asked. Will you come? The rogue swallowed the last mouthful of fresh kill and cleaned his muzzle with one paw. I'm fine on my own, his eyes narrowed, and I don't want you ordering me around. It's not like that, Firestar protested, but the rogue stalked off without letting him explain. Guilt gnawed at Firestar as he headed back to the gorge. Maybe if he hadn't been so hostile when they first met, he could have persuaded the brown rogue to give SkyClan a chance. Finding the trail leading down the cliff face, he padded wearily along it to the warrior's cave. Faint squeals of excitement rose from the bottom of the gorge. Firestar peered down to spot Sandstorm and Clover's 3 kits batting something around at the water's edge. Warmth flooded through him when he saw how happy and relaxed his mate looked as she played with the kits, happier than she had been since they left the forest.
Hi, Firestar.
Scratch's voice interrupted his thoughts.
Sandstorm says you're organizing a meeting to tell more cats about the new clan. I could take you to some other rogues if you like. They'll probably come if I ask them.
Firestar was glad Scratch was becoming more committed to SkyClan, but not sure he liked the Tabby Tom's cool assumption of authority over the other rogues. Still, if they respected him, that would make Firestar's task easier overall. "Okay, thanks," he meowed.
Let's go then.
Scratch emerged from the warrior's den and set off down the trail.
What now?
Firestar wailed inwardly.
I haven't eaten all day.
Sighing, he followed Scratch down the cliff face and caught up with him as he was speaking to Sandstorm.
I'm going to introduce Firestar to a few rogues, he was telling her.
Great! Sandstorm ducked her head as Rock sprang onto her back.
Get off!
She mewed, rolling over and patting gently at him with one paw, her claws sheathed. Rock just squeaked happily, and Sandstorm disappeared under a mound of fur as Bounce and Tiny jumped on her too. You're obviously busy, Firestar murmured, amused. I'll see you later. Scratch and Firestar padded side by side across the rocky spur to the trees and undergrowth downstream. Firestar hadn't visited this part of the territory since his meeting with Cherry and Boris, and his pelt prickled at the memory of being watched. Then he drew to a halt, his heart beginning to thump. This wasn't just a memory. The same sensations poured over him, and icy fear trickled through him from ears to tail tip.
What's the matter?
Scratch, some way ahead, glanced over his shoulder.
Nothing.
Firestar's voice shook, and he forced it to be steady. I just thought we might stop and hunt. I haven't had so much as the sniff of a mouse since this morning.
Okay.
Scratch retraced his steps and stood tasting the air. Do you smell anything odd? Firestar asked. He had picked up the same prey scent as before, masked by the sharp aroma of crushed leaves. Scratch paused, drew in more air, then shrugged.
Prey, grass and leaves. Why?
Nothing. Firestar wanted Scratch to respect him, not think he was a coward looking for danger under every bush. Let's hunt. Scratch stalked away into the bushes and Firestar padded off in another direction. While he tried to find prey, his senses stayed alert for whatever hostile creature was watching him. Is it something to do with why SkyClan left the gorge? He wondered. Sky had been reluctant to answer any questions, but Firestar was certain that the old cat knew more than he was telling. I'll have to question him again, he decided. The future of the new clan might be at risk if Sky insisted on keeping secrets about possible danger. Firestar stood in the shadows under a thorn bush, looking out across a clear space in the midst of the undergrowth. Nothing stirred among the ferns and grasses. Who are you? He whispered. What do you want? There was no reply. Only vicious hatred hurled at him with such force that it almost carried him off his paws. In the twilight, he thought he could make out dark, glinting eyes. His pelt crawled. A rustling in a nearby bush made him jump, but it was only a vole dashing out into the open space. Firestar leaped after it and snapped its neck. As he picked it up, the scent masked everything else, and the sense of a hostile presence around him faded a little. Still, he pushed his way to the edge of the thicket and out into the open by the river before he crouched to eat his fresh kill. Scratch was sitting a few tail lengths farther downstream, cleaning his face and whiskers.
Are you ready?
He asked, drawing his paw over one ear.
It'll be dark soon.
Firestar gulped down the rest of the vole. Okay, lead on. The tabby rogue bounded alongside the river until he reached the fallen tree that Sky had used to cross a few days before. Leading Firestar over to the far bank, Scratch started to climb another trail that led up the cliff face on the opposite side. Firestar panted after him, wishing he had the rogue's powerful haunches. Scratch was a true SkyClan cat. Firestar had never climbed the cliff on this side of the river before. At the top, there was a wide stretch of grass that gave way to undergrowth, and then trees. His spirits lifted as he padded with Scratch underneath the branches. This was more like his territory in the forest. When we set the borders, we'll have to make this part of SkyClan territory, Firestar sniffed appreciatively. There's plenty of prey. Moss, too, he added, flicking his ears toward thick cushions of it, growing on the gnarled roots of an oak tree. Scratch gave him a sidelong glance.
Then you'd better convince the rogues who live here already.
Firestar realized he had a point. He didn't want to start the new clan by throwing other cats out of dens they had occupied for moons. Scratch wove his way through the trees until they came to a hollow tree trunk lying amid lush grass in the middle of a clearing. A pale, blurred shape was visible at the mouth of the tree trunk. As Firestar drew nearer, he recognized the cream and brown tabby she-cat he had surprised in the scrubland near the two-leg place.
Scratch?
Her ears twitched warily as the two toms drew nearer.
Who's this with you?
Hi, Firestar meowed, slightly embarrassed when Scratch had introduced him. We met the other day. The she-cat emerged from the end of the trunk. Her amber gaze traveled over him steadily.
I remember you,
she murmured.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you like that. You gave me a fright, practically leaping on top of me.
Firestar dipped his head. It was my fault.
My name's Leaf,
the she-cat continued, settling down in the long grass and waving her tail to invite Firestar to do the same.
What can I do for you?
Firestar crouched beside her, tucking his paws underneath him, while Scratch clawed his way to the top of the trunk and gazed out into the trees. Firestar wondered if he was keeping watch, though the hostile sensation had faded as soon as they crossed the river, and now he was aware of nothing more than the ordinary scents and sounds of a forest at dusk. You know the place in the gorge where the river flows out? He began. Leaf listened in silence to the story of how SkyClan had been forced to flee from the forest.
Why are you telling me?
She asked when he had finished. The old SkyClan leader appeared to me in dreams, Firestar explained. He sent me to rebuild the clan, and I'm looking for cats who might want to join. Leaf looked startled, and for several heartbeats she didn't reply, her gaze fixed on the shadows among the trees.
I don't know, she mewed eventually. I like it here, and I'm fine on my own. Scratch, are you going to join?
Scratch padded along to the end of the trunk so he could look down at her.
I'm thinking about it. Cats living together could protect one another.
Leaf nodded.
That's true. Living alone is especially hard for old cats and kits. You remember Scree?
She asked Scratch.
The old rogue who lived by the dead willow tree?
That's right.
Sadness welled up in Leaf's eyes.
I found him trying to fight off a fox. It turned tail when it saw me, but Scree was badly wounded. I stayed with him that night and tried to help him, but he died before morning.
She turned an intense gaze on Firestar.
That wouldn't happen in a clan, would it?
It might, Firestar answered honestly. But mostly clan cats don't have to fight alone, and if they're wounded, we have a medicine cat to look after them. Leaf gave her chest fur a couple of thoughtful licks. We're having a meeting tomorrow night, Firestar told her. Why don't you come and find out more?
All right, she meowed. I'll come to the meeting, but I'm not promising anything else.
I wouldn't expect you to, Firestar assured her. He glanced back as Scratch led him farther into the wood. He fiercely hoped that Leaf would decide to join SkyClan. She already seemed to be aware of how a clan could take care of its weaker members. Any clan would be glad to have her. Scratch led him along a narrow path that twisted among arching clumps of fern, the thick fronds blocking out the last of the daylight. Firestar picked up a strong cat scent before he saw anything. Not long after, a bad-tempered hiss came out of the darkness. Just ahead of Firestar, Scratch meowed.
Hi, Tangle.
This is my place, a voice snapped. Peering over Scratch's shoulder, Firestar made out a large tomcat with ragged tabby fur crouched among the roots of a tree. His fur was bristling and his amber eyes glared as if he were about to spring on them. Go away! Stepping around Scratch, Firestar dipped his head in greeting. My name's Firestar. I'm holding a meeting for all the cats who— I don't like meetings, Tangle rasped. Don't like other cats much. Now go away, unless you want a clawed pelt. Scratch touched Firestar on the shoulder.
He means it. We'd better go.
Tomorrow night in the gorge, if you change your mind, Firestar meowed quickly.
Tangle unsheathed his claws. Scratch butted Firestar in the side with one shoulder and muttered,
"Move."
To Tangle, he added,
"We're going. See you around sometime."
"Not if I see you first," Tangle hissed, as Firestar and Scratch retreated into the ferns. "He's not very friendly, is he?" Firestar commented when they were out of earshot. Scratch shrugged.
"He never has been. I thought we'd better ask him, but I'm not surprised he wouldn't listen."
They came to a narrow stream reflecting the pale evening sky as it wound through clumps of grass and watermint. Scratch leaped across and headed upstream until he came to a place where the bank overhung a narrow strip of pebbles. Once again, Firestar picked up a strong scent of cat. Scratch halted.
"Patch, are you there?"
he meowed. A black and white head poked out from under the overhang. "Scratch? Is that you?" His voice was cautious, but to Firestar's relief, he didn't sound as unfriendly as Tangle.
"I've brought another cat to see you," Scratch replied. "We've come to tell you about the cats who used to live in the gorge."
"Oh, them!" Patch came out of his den and stood on the strip of pebbles, looking up. "I know about them. I hope you haven't brought that mad old rogue who's always going on about them." "No, he brought me." Firestar stepped forward and looked into Patch's gleaming green eyes. "And Sky isn't mad. Far from it. He has kept alive the memory of the clan for many seasons." Yet again he explained what he was trying to do. "Sky Clan could be great again," he finished. "We're looking for strong cats to join, and Scratch thought you might be interested." "It does get a bit lonely here sometimes," Patch admitted, flicking his tail tip. "I could come to your meeting, I suppose, and have a look at the other cats who might be joining." "Thank you," Firestar meowed. "You'll be welcome." When they had said goodbye to Patch, they started back toward the river. By now, it was almost completely dark. Little starlight penetrated the thick canopy of leaves. Scratch checked the opening of a hollow oak tree, but it was empty, and the cat scent that clung around it was stale.
"That's Rainfur's den," he remarked. "It looks like he hasn't been around for a couple of days."
Firestar felt worn out when they arrived back at the gorge. But if only a few of the cats they had seen today decided to join, they would have the beginnings of a clan. But only the beginning, he told himself. There was a lot of work to do before Sky Clan would truly live again. They had almost reached the path down the cliff when Scratch let out a sharp exclamation and bounded ahead. Firestar caught up to find him talking to a tomcat whose pale gray pelt was marked with darker flecks.
"This is Rainfur,"
he told Firestar.
"We looked for you in your den,"
he added to the gray tom. Rainfur flicked his ears. "I've been downstream. Is there a problem?"
"No, just some news. Firestar, tell him what you told the others."
As Firestar launched into his story again, he was aware that Rainfur was looking doubtful. He seemed like a strong, proud cat who would need a good reason before he gave up his independence. When Firestar invited him to the meeting, he was quite prepared for him to refuse. He was surprised when Rainfur nodded. "I'll come," the gray tom meowed, "but I'm not sure I like the idea. What will happen to cats who live here if they don't want to join?" "Nothing." Firestar put as much conviction as he could into his voice. "We don't want to quarrel with any cat." Rainfur's eyes narrowed. "This is a peaceful place. I wouldn't want anything to spoil it." Abruptly, he turned and plunged into the undergrowth.
"See you tomorrow,"
Scratch called after him. Firestar thought over the gray tom's words as he followed Scratch down the path toward the river. He wanted to include at least part of this wood in the new clan's territory, but he didn't want to cause trouble with the rogues who decided to remain as they were. When Scratch reached the bottom of the cliff, he turned toward the fallen tree trunk, but Firestar raised his tail to stop him and led the way upstream, intending to cross the river by the rock pile. He still remembered the hostile force he had sensed in the undergrowth, and his belly lurched at the thought of encountering it again. Moonlight washed over the gorge as Firestar and Scratch crossed the river again. Firestar leaped from the last rock to the ground to see a pale shape rising up from the shadow of the rocks. "Sandstorm!" Firestar exclaimed. "I thought you'd be asleep. It's late." His mate padded up and touched noses with him. I wanted to hear what happened.
I'll be off then.
Scratch gave them both a wave of his tail and bounded away to his cave. Remembering that Clover and her kits would be sleeping in the warrior's den, Firestar settled down on a rock by the side of the river. Sandstorm crouched beside him, pressing her side warmly against his while he told her about meeting the rogues.
Then it looks as if SkyClan will return after all,
she mewed softly. Yes, I think it will. But in spite of his optimistic words, Firestar's belly churned when he thought of the meeting to come. He was used to addressing ThunderClan as their leader, but he wasn't the leader of the cats who would gather here on the following night. Would they listen to him? Am I doing the right thing? Shouldn't there be a sign from StarClan or from the SkyClan warrior ancestor? Where were all the other warrior ancestors of the shattered clan? He sat gazing up at the brilliance of Silverpelt for a long time, until Sandstorm drew her tongue over his ear and urged him back to the cave to sleep. Chapter 24. The half-moon shone coldly as Firestar padded down the stony trail to the rock pile. No other cats were waiting for him, and he couldn't make out any shadowy shapes approaching down the cliff or along the river. Only Sandstorm was with him, pausing beside him at the foot of the rocks to gaze at him with luminous green eyes. Firestar shifted from paw to paw, uneasy under the light of the half-moon. This was the time when medicine cats met to share dreams with StarClan. Somehow it felt wrong to be waiting for other cats to gather. The moon should have been full. Could that be a bad omen? Shaking off the premonition of disaster, Firestar let his gaze follow the twisting line of the river, glittering silver in the starlight. He wanted to leap to the top of the rock and yowl the words that drew his own clan to a meeting. But the familiar summons would mean nothing here, and he was not sure there would be any other cats to hear it. Suppose no cat comes to the meeting. What will I do then?
You'll be okay.
Sandstorm touched his shoulder with the tip of her tail.
It's hard when you're not these cats' leader, but you still have to shape them into a clan.
Some of them, Firestar corrected her. Even at his most optimistic, he couldn't believe that all the cats he had spoken to would agree to join the new clan. The last thing he wanted was to force any cat. It was important that they joined because they wanted to and were willing to live by the warrior code. Am I afraid they won't do what I want? No, it was more than that. The cats who joined SkyClan would have to be determined enough to survive after he and Sandstorm had returned to the forest, and they would succeed only if they were committed to the warrior code to the last claw and whisker.
Go on,
Sandstorm nudged him toward the rock pile.
It's time.
Firestar met her brilliant gaze for a couple of heartbeats and drank in her sweet scent. New strength seemed to flow into him. He sprang upward and reached the top of the rock pile in a few vigorous bounds. From this vantage point, he could see farther downstream and up the gorge in the other direction, but there was still no sign of any cats, except for Sandstorm sitting patiently at the foot of the rocks. The half-moon floated higher in the sky. Where are you? Firestar thought desperately. Then he caught sight of a flicker of movement in the shadows near the cliff face. He heard the scrape of claws on rock, and Sky pulled himself onto the topmost boulder to stand beside him.
Greetings, he meowed. I see I'm in time for the meeting.
You know about that? Firestar asked, surprised. Sky dismissed the question with a flick of his ears. His gray pelt was silver in the moonlight, and his pale eyes shone. Firestar wondered if Sky had ways of knowing things that other cats couldn't understand. Do you want to speak to them first? He suggested. You're a descendant of SkyClan. They'll listen to you.
Listen to me? The crazy rogue who sits looking at the moon?
A rusty purr of amusement came from the old cat.
No, you must speak to them. More than anything, they need a leader to follow, and you can walk that path more easily than I.
But I am not their leader. Firestar started to protest. Sky looked deep into his eyes. You can go back to your own clan soon, he promised. But my clan needs you now. Firestar bowed his head. I will try, he whispered. Straightening up, he saw with a start of surprise that cats had begun to appear in the gorge. He spotted Scratch sitting at the foot of the rocks, half hidden in shadows. Clover was guiding her kits down the stony trail and thrust them gently toward a niche in the rock pile itself. All 3 kits were squeaking with excitement. Hush, Clover murmured. We have to listen to Firestar. He's going to tell us something very important. An excited yowl drowned out the kit's reply, and Firestar looked up to see Cherry and Boris slip over the edge of the cliff and pad rapidly down the trail until they reached the rock pile. Where are they all? Boris asked, gazing around indignantly. I thought they'd be here by now. I told you we should have gone to fetch Hutch, Cherry meowed. He's probably curled up somewhere with his 2 legs. The fat, lazy... Quiet, Sandstorm interrupted. Look, some cat is coming now. Firestar had already spotted the slender shape approaching from downstream. It was Lichen, a mottled brown she-cat he and Scratch had met the day before in the woods below the gorge. She halted, clearly nervous at seeing so many other cats waiting, and sat on a stone at the very edge of the river. Leaf and Rainfur arrived next, padding side by side as if they already knew each other. They spotted Scratch and went to join him at the base of the cliff. At the same time, Firestar glimpsed movement farther up the rock face. Hutch was picking his way cautiously down to join Cherry and Boris, and to Firestar's surprise, Oscar was close behind. The black kitty pet halted on a ledge a couple of tail lengths from the ground, and crouched there with his paws tucked under him. Last came Patch, bounding up the path beside the river as if he were afraid of being late. He gave a wary nod to Lichen and sat near her at the edge of the gathering. Firestar's pelt prickled as he felt the gaze of every cat trained on him. He exchanged a glance with Sky, who stepped back and slid over the edge of the boulder, leaving Firestar alone at the top of the rock pile. He straightened up, holding his head high, trying to show in every hair on his pelt the pride he felt in being a warrior. Greetings, he began, and thanks to all of you for coming. Yesterday I told you about Sky Clan, who used to live here in the gorge. I told you that I was sent here to rebuild that clan. Get on with it, then! A bored yowl came from the ledge where Oscar sat. Firestar's ears twitched. Had the black cat come just to disrupt the meeting? He ignored the comment and went on. Living in a clan, cats have the support of their clanmates from birth to death. Mothers look after their kits, while warriors protect the nursing mothers and bring them food. When the kits reach the age of 6 moons, they become apprentices, with mentors who teach them to fight and hunt. Excited squeals came from somewhere farther down the rock pile. I want to be an apprentice. So do I. Can we? I want to be an apprentice now. Hush, Firestar heard Clover's voice. You'll have to go back to the cave if you can't listen to Firestar quietly. When the apprentices are fully trained, Firestar went on, they become warriors. Warriors are the strength of a clan. They must be ready to defend it against enemies like foxes or badgers or other cats. A shiver passed through him as he remembered the battle to drive BloodClan out of the forest. They must hunt for the clan and make sure every cat is fed. And what do the warriors get out of it? Rainfur called, rising to his paws. Honor and respect, Firestar replied. The loyalty of friends. The satisfaction of knowing that they have served their clanmates. Rainfur gave him a brusque nod and sat down again. Firestar didn't think he was very impressed with his answer. When warriors grow old, he continued, They retire and join the clan's elders. Part of the apprentices' duties is to look after them, to change their bedding and bring them fresh kill. They are honored because they have given their lives in the service of their clan. Every clan has a leader and a deputy to oversee training, organize patrols, and decide what to do if danger threatens. Clan leaders are given 9 lives by Star Clan, so they can be first in every battle and last to take fresh kill if the clan is hungry. He caught a gleam of interest in Scratch's eyes when he mentioned 9 lives, and felt a prickle of unease. And if any cat is sick or wounded, he went on, each clan has a medicine cat to care for them. Medicine cats have special knowledge of healing herbs, and they guide their clan through dreams sent from Star Clan. That's twice you've mentioned Star Clan, Leaf mewed. She had listened intently to everything Firestar had said, her shining gaze fixed on him. What is that? Firestar wasn't surprised by the question, but he paused before answering. Was he right to tell these cats that the spirits of their warrior ancestors were watching over them? He wasn't sure that Star Clan walked in these skies, and he had seen only one Sky Clan warrior ancestor. You can see Star Clan above you, he explained, raising his tail to point at the glitter of Silverpelt. Clan cats who die go to hunt with them. I don't know how it is for cats who have no clan. An uncertain murmur rose from the cats below. He understood why this was difficult for them. Everything else he had told them made practical sense, whether they approved of it or not. But he was asking them to take this on trust. Clover sprang to her paws.
Well, I'm going to join the new clan, she meowed. Firestar, Sandstorm, and Scratch saved my kits from a fox. They'll be safe if we're part of a clan.
Firestar winced. Catching Sandstorm's eye, he saw the same misgivings reflected there. Clover was still thinking of Sky Clan as something she could depend on, without considering how she could contribute to the life of the clan. Sky jumped up to stand on the boulder beside Firestar. His pale eyes shone as he gazed down at the cats. A ripple of surprise passed through them as he began to speak in a low, husky voice. I have kept alive the memory of Sky Clan all my life, he rasped. I know that my ancestors have been waiting to see the clan rebuilt. But sometimes I despaired that it could ever come to be. Firestar still wasn't sure that the cats below understood the meaning of warrior ancestors, but no cat rose to challenge Sky. Instead, Firestar could see respect dawning in their eyes. This wasn't the cranky elder they had dismissed as mad. This was a cat whose wisdom and experience made him worth listening to. Now you have a leader who has come a long way to rebuild Sky Clan, the old cat went on. Listen to him well before you decide. He will show you a way of life that gives honor to every cat. Yes, I'm a leader, Firestar thought with a sudden stab of panic. But I'm not their leader. He was a stranger to the gorge, and the cats here were unlikely to listen to him with the same respect they were beginning to show Sky. They were murmuring among themselves again, and so far none of the newcomers had committed themselves to joining Sky Clan. Firestar realized that the meeting could be about to break up in failure.
We're going to join the clan,
Cherry sprang excitedly to her paws.
Come on, it's going to be great.
Count me in too.
Scratch turned to Firestar and spoke directly to him.
It makes sense that cats are stronger when they're together.
Instantly, Firestar felt more confident. He had hoped Scratch would make this decision. He was a powerful cat, and while he still needed to learn to live by the warrior code, there wasn't much any cat could teach him about hunting and fighting. But had Scratch decided to join because he wanted to become a 9-lived leader? Thank you, Firestar meowed, pushing away his concerns. Sky Clan welcomes you.
Well, I won't join.
It was Lycan who spoke, politely but with no hesitation in her voice.
I'm sorry, but I don't feel comfortable around so many cats. I like my privacy too much.
That's your decision. Firestar was disappointed. He liked what he had seen of the mottled she-cat. And if you change your mind, you know where we are.
Thanks, but I won't. I wish you well, though.
With a dip of her head, she turned and padded away down the riverbank. Rainfur watched her go, then rose to his paws. I haven't heard anything that makes me want to join, he growled. All I can see is other cats will be telling me what to do all the time. That's not how it works, Firestar protested. But part of him could understand why the Grey Tom felt like that. Firestar had no right to tell these cats how to live their lives. Why should they listen when so far they had gotten on perfectly well without him? I'd sooner hunt for myself, Rainfur went on. I don't need SkyClan. I'm sorry, Firestar mewed. SkyClan could use you. Rainfur's pelt bristled. I don't want to be used, thanks, he spat. Whirling around, he bounded downstream after Lycan. Firestar stared after him, angry that he had spoken so clumsily. Then he noticed that Leaf was gazing up at him with sympathy in her eyes.
Don't mind Rainfur, she meowed. He always was a bit touchy. Maybe we can persuade him later, when he sees how the clan works.
Firestar's ears twitched. We?
Yes, I'll join,
Leaf assured him.
If the clan really works how you say it will, then cats will have a purpose. We'll be more than just rogues, just living to stay alive.
Firestar was impressed. Her words might have come from a true clan cat. He felt a purr rising in his chest. Thank you, he mewed. Glancing at the cats who so far had not decided, Patch, Hutch, and Oscar, he added, All I can tell you is that SkyClan lived here once, and could live here again, following the warrior code for the benefit of every cat. Do you want to be part of it? Patch rasped his tongue over his chest fur. Okay, I'll give it a go. Cherry gave Hutch a nudge with her shoulder.
Come on, Hutch. What about it?
Hutch looked up at Firestar, embarrassment in his amber eyes.
I'd like to. I really would. But I'm afraid I won't be good enough at all this hunting and fighting. I've always been a kitty pet.
We're kitty pets too, Boris pointed out. Firestar can teach you all that stuff. If you join us, you'll be very welcome, Firestar told him. The Tabby Tom nodded.
Okay then. I'd miss Cherry and Boris if they went off without me.
Firestar flicked his ears toward the one cat who so far had not spoken. What about you, Oscar? The black kitty pet rose slowly from the ledge where he had been crouching. You don't think I came here to join, do you? Why would I leave a couple of perfectly good housefolk who give me everything I want? I didn't spend moons training them for nothing. Why are you here then? Boris demanded. Oscar's jaws stretched in an insolent yawn. I just wanted to find out what stupid ideas you'd come up with. And they are stupid. You're all mouse-brained. With a flick of his tail, he set off up the trail, back toward the cliff top.
Mouse-brained yourself!
Cherry yowled after him. Sky padded forward to the edge of the rock pile and looked down at the remaining cats.
SkyClan lives again,
he announced. Raising his head to the misty half-moon, he yelled,
SkyClan! SkyClan!
SkyClan! SkyClan! The cats down in the gorge replied. Firestar shivered from ears to tail tip. What had once seemed so impossible, so far off, was now real. The cats who stood around the rock pile, yowling to the stars, were the beginnings of a new clan to replace the one lost so long ago. Then cold claws seemed to grip his heart. That sense of anger and hatred he had felt in the undergrowth downstream washed over him again. He raised his head to scan the bushes on the cliff top, and was sure he could spot glittering eyes among the branches. Chapter 25. The following day dawned clear and cool. Firestar stepped out onto the ledge outside the warrior's cave to see Patch and Leaf scrambling over the spur of rock on their way upstream. After the meeting, all the new clan cats had returned to their own homes. One of the first tasks would be to collect more bedding and sort out the dens so that the caves in the gorge could become a real clan camp. Sandstorm joined him, yawning and giving one ear a vigorous scratch with her hind paw.
We'll have to move Clover down to the nursery, she mewed, flicking her ears toward where the mother cat and her kits were sleeping against the far wall of the cave. There won't be room in here once the warriors arrive.
We need a den for the apprentices, too, Firestar pointed out. And the elders, the leader, the medicine cat.
Well, we'll have one elder when Sky moves in with us, Sandstorm blinked thoughtfully. But there's no leader yet, apart from you.
No, I'm leader of Thunder Clan. Star Clan will show us which cat is meant to be leader of Sky Clan.
And a medicine cat, Sandstorm added. You can't have a clan without a medicine cat.
Firestar murmured agreement. He suspected that finding a medicine cat could be even harder than finding a leader, and he hadn't begun to tackle that problem yet. Until the night before, he hadn't been certain that there would be a clan at all. He had to push his worries to the back of his mind as Leaf and Patch came into view a little way down the stony trail, calling out a greeting. Patch looked nervous, but Leaf's ears were pricked with anticipation. A heartbeat or two later, Firestar heard paw steps from up above, and Cherry, Boris, and Hutch appeared from the cliff top.
We're ready for our hunting lesson, Boris meowed, his eyes shining.
That's good.
Sandstorm twitched her tail approvingly.
We'll be able to take out 2 full patrols.
Can we lead them?
Cherry bounced forward to stand in front of Firestar.
Please? We know all the good places for prey.
No, you're not warriors yet. Firestar didn't want to dampen the young cat's enthusiasm, but they had to get used to the way things were done in a clan. Don't worry, he added when Cherry flattened her ears in disappointment. You'll be leading patrols before you know it.
Boris and Leaf, you come with me,
Sandstorm mewed.
We'll pick up Scratch on the way and see what we can find in the bushes downstream. Is that okay with you, Firestar?
Fine. The rest of us can hunt on the cliff top. When Sandstorm had left with her patrol, Firestar led Cherry, Hutch, and Patch up the trail and through the bushes on the edge of the cliff. The sky was bright where the sun would rise, but there was still no sign of movement from the two-leg place. Let's head that way, Firestar suggested, waving his tail toward the huge two-leg barn. I haven't tried hunting there yet. Not much later, he was starting to think he had made the wrong decision. The trees and bushes near the fence of the huge nest were oddly lacking in prey. The scent of crow food and rats from the fence made it almost impossible to taste anything else on the air.
Sandstorm's patrol will catch much more,
Cherry muttered.
And Boris will never let me hear the end of it.
Almost ready to give up and go somewhere else, Firestar stopped trying to track down prey to give Hutch and Patch their first lesson in the hunter's crouch and the right way to stalk. Hutch concentrated very hard, but found it difficult to get his haunches into the proper position, while Patch had it almost right the first time. Of course, the rogue cats had been hunting for themselves since they were kits. They would need to learn only the skills of hunting in a group before they were as good as any forest warrior. Okay, Firestar meowed. I want you to imagine that there's prey under that gorse bush over there. He waved his tail to show them which bush he meant. Let me see you stalk up to it. All 3 cats set off. Watching them critically, Firestar admired Cherry's graceful, controlled prowl. She had learned a lot since she first tracked him in the undergrowth downstream. Patch was slinking along with his belly fur brushing the ground, and even Hutch seemed to have gotten his paws under control. "Keep going. You're doing great," Firestar encouraged them. Suddenly, Patch sprang up with a hiss of astonishment. One paw flashed out, and Firestar spotted a small brown shape as it was tossed in the air. Patch grabbed it as it fell to the ground again. He turned back to Firestar with a mouse dangling limply from his jaws. "Well done," Firestar meowed. "First catch to you." "I think it was half asleep," Patch admitted, dropping the mouse. "It never had a chance." "Fresh kill is fresh kill, however you catch it." Firestar began to scrape at the ground with his hind paws. "We'll bury it now and take it back with us when we're ready." Which won't be long, he promised himself. He didn't like this part of the territory. It was too quiet, too bare of prey, and something about the huge two-leg barn made him uncomfortable. "Let's see your crouches again," he mewed. Hutch had drawn a little way ahead of Cherry. The tabby kitty pet had nearly reached the gorse bush when a squirrel started up from underneath the branches and raced for the safety of a clump of beech trees. Startled, Hutch waited a heartbeat too long before chasing after it.
I'll get it,
Cherry yowled, streaking past Hutch with her tail streaming out. Hutch halted, looking bewildered. The squirrel reached the tree with Cherry hard on its paws and swarmed up the trunk until it reached the lowest branch.
Got you!
Cherry hurled herself into the air, but she had misjudged the leap. A mouse length short, her paws struck a clump of leaves, and she hung there, clawing frantically, kicking her hind legs and scattering scraps of leaf everywhere until she managed to haul herself up onto the branch. Meanwhile, the squirrel had vanished among the leaves farther up the tree.
Mouse dung!
Cherry spat. Firestar strolled to the foot of the tree and looked up at her. Privately, he thought the young tortoiseshell's failure would do her no harm. She needed to learn not to show off, but he wouldn't say anything to upset her. She looked frustrated enough. "Are you okay?" he asked.
No! Stupid squirrel! I should have caught it!
"It was my fault,"
Hutch padded up beside Firestar.
"I should have been a bit quicker."
"Don't worry," Firestar touched his shoulder with the tip of his tail. "This is only your first lesson. You're doing fine." Hutch looked unconvinced.
"I feel like I'm letting you all down. No cat will want to hunt for me if I can't hunt for myself."
Firestar let his tail rest on the tabby tom's shoulder for a moment longer. "That's not how a clan works," he explained. "You'll be allowed your share of the fresh kill pile like any other warrior, and you will hunt for yourself and the rest of us too before very long." Looking from Hutch's disappointed face to Cherry's frustrated one, he turned and signaled to Patch with his tail. "Fetch that mouse," he called. "We'll see if there's more prey nearer the cliff top." Just as Firestar had hoped, there was better hunting in the bushes that edged the cliff. Before very long, the patrol was able to return to the gorge with a good haul of prey. Hutch was bursting with pride at bringing down his first sparrow with a leap that proved the tabby kitty pet bore skyclam blood. His jaws full of fresh kill, Firestar led the way down into the gorge. The sun was up and warm. Honey-colored light pooled on the rocks and dazzled on the smooth curve of water where it poured out of the darkness. Firestar and Sandstorm had kept a small fresh-kill pile near the entrance to the warrior's cave, but that wouldn't do now. They would need to look for a sheltered spot near the waterside, where every cat could come and eat. As he padded down the trail, Firestar saw that Sandstorm and her patrol had also returned. He paused, stiffening, close to the rock pile. Sandstorm and Scratch stood facing each other with their neck fur fluffed out, as if they were quarreling. Leaf and Boris looked on anxiously, while Clover, at the water's edge, gathered her kits to her. Firestar bounded down the last few tail lengths of the trail. Sandstorm had deposited her patrol's fresh kill under an overhang at the bottom of the rock pile. He added his own before turning to the two cats.
And I'm telling you that's not the way it's done,
Sandstorm growled, her green eyes furious.
In a clan, the elders and the nursing queens always eat first.
Scratch lashed his tail.
That's mouse-brained. It's the warriors who catch the prey.
There's no need to argue,
Clover interrupted in a soft voice.
I don't mind. You can eat first. There's plenty for every cat.
That's not the point, Firestar intervened. Sandstorm's head whipped around. She had obviously been so intent on Scratch that she hadn't heard Firestar approach. When she saw him, the fur on her shoulders began to lie flat.
Thanks, StarClan, you're here. Tell this stupid furball.
Firestar lifted his tail to silence her. Hurling insults wasn't going to help. To Scratch, he mewed. Sandstorm's right. Just because warriors are strong enough to hunt doesn't mean they have the right to eat first.
That's not what I meant,
Scratch protested, his green eyes wide with indignation.
The clan depends on its warriors. They should be fed first, so that they're always strong enough to deal with unexpected trouble.
With a hostile glance at Sandstorm, he added,
Some cats won't listen.
To Firestar's relief, Sandstorm didn't respond. Brushing her pelt reassuringly, he padded forward to face the Ginger Tom. Yes, it's important for a clan to have strong warriors, but the warrior code isn't just based on what is practical. Honor matters equally as much. Elders and nursing queens must be shown respect, because without them, the clan wouldn't survive.
SkyClan hasn't survived,
Scratch muttered darkly. True, but that's no reason to cast the warrior code aside. Whatever happened to the original SkyClan cats? Firestar wished that he knew what had happened to SkyClan, but there was no time to think of that now. It wasn't the fault of the elders or the nursing queens. We must continue to honor them. Scratch hesitated. Then his head whipped around and he glared at Clover.
Okay, eat.
Looking very embarrassed, Clover darted past him to the fresh kill pile, snatched a blackbird, and carried it to where her kits were crouched by the side of the water. Sandstorm let out a sigh and padded off to say something quietly to Leaf, who rested her tail tip sympathetically on the ginger she-cat's shoulder. Firestar signaled to the other cats to come and take prey from the pile, though he didn't have much appetite himself. He couldn't help wondering how many more arguments there would be before Scratch and the other cats really understood the warrior code. Sun High had come and gone while the cats, full-fed, drowsed in the sunlight or withdrew to the cool shade of the caves. Every cat in the new clan was there. Firestar had even spotted Sky padding quietly down the gorge and curling up in the shadow of a thorn tree. Firestar lay beside Sandstorm, his tongue rasping over her shoulder in long, rhythmic strokes. Sandstorm's eyes were green slits, and a purr rumbled deep in her chest.
I'm sorry I lost my temper with Scratch, she murmured. You handled him much better.
Firestar gave her another lick before replying. Scratch is going to make a fine warrior, but he has to see that the warrior code is about more than just strength. He'll learn, given time. Sandstorm sighed.
Just as Clover has to learn that a clan is more than protection.
She butted Firestar's shoulder affectionately with her head.
We'll have to show them.
True, and I think I know how to start. He rose to his paws and arched his back in a long stretch. Then he bounded up to the top of the rock pile and yowled out the familiar words. Let all cats old enough to catch their own prey join here beneath the rock pile for a clan meeting. Sky started and sat up straight, gazing around as if he wasn't sure where the call had come from. Leaf and Patch, who had been drowsing together at the water's edge, raised their heads, then sat up to listen. Scratch popped his head out of his cave. Cherry and Boris came racing down the trail from the cliff top, while Clover's kits bundled excitedly out of the warrior's den and bounced down to the gorge, followed more slowly by their mother. Within a few heartbeats, the whole clan had gathered and sat around the rock pile looking up at Firestar. Cats of SkyClan, Firestar began. Pride rippled through his fur as he addressed these cats by their clan name for the first time. Last night you committed yourselves to this clan and the warrior code. Today, the clan will honor you with your clan names. Scratch, Leaf, Hutch, Clover, and Patch, please come to stand at the bottom of the rock pile." Exchanging bewildered glances, the 5 cats rose to their paws and drew closer to the bottom of the rocks. Clover's kits tried to follow her, and Sandstorm gently halted them with a sweep of her tail. Firestar picked his way down the rocks to stand in front of the group of cats. There had never been a warrior ceremony like this before, and he had to get it right so that it had meaning with their warrior ancestors, if there were any watching. "I, Firestar, leader of Thunder Clan and mentor to Sky Clan, call upon their warrior ancestors to look down upon these cats," he began. "They have a true desire to learn the ways of your noble warrior code, and I commend them to you as warriors in their turn." Padding up to Scratch, he went on. "Scratch, do you promise to uphold the warrior code and to protect and defend this clan, even at the cost of your life?" Scratch hesitated. Sandstorm slipped up behind him and whispered, "Say, I do."
"I do,"
Scratch meowed, his eyes fixed steadily on Firestar. "Then by the powers of Star Clan, I give you your warrior name. Scratch, from this moment, you will be known as Sharpclaw. Star Clan trusts you will give all your courage and strength to the new clan." Sharpclaw blinked, then dipped his head. Firestar bent to rest his muzzle between the new warrior's ears. "Lick his shoulder," Sandstorm directed. Sharpclaw obeyed and stepped back. "Now we welcome him to the clan by calling out his name," Sandstorm meowed. "Sharpclaw! Sharpclaw!" The rest of the clan echoed her, Cherry yowling, "Sharpclaw!" at the top of her voice and bouncing up and down enthusiastically. Firestar gave Patch the warrior name of Patchfoot, and Clover became Clovertail. When he turned to Hutch, he saw doubt and fear in the kitty pet's eyes, and was half afraid that when he was asked to take the oath he would back out. "Hutch, do you promise to uphold the warrior code and to protect and defend this clan, even at the cost of your life?" Hutch swallowed. His voice shook as he replied, "I do." "Then by the powers of Star Clan, I give you your warrior name. Hutch, from this moment, you will be known as Shortwhisker. Star Clan trusts you will give all your strength and wisdom to the building of this new clan." As he spoke, he saw the doubt fade from Shortwhisker's eyes to be replaced by determination. Firestar knew he would be a fine warrior when he had learned to trust himself. Finally he turned to Leaf. She had waited quietly, acknowledging each of her new clanmates by their warrior names, and he was struck by the intentness in her eyes when he spoke to her. There was no hesitation as she meowed, "I do." "Then by the powers of Star Clan, I give you your warrior name. Leaf, from this moment, you will be known as Leaf Dapple. Star Clan trusts you will give all your intelligence and loyalty to the building of this new clan." Leaf Dapple's amber eyes glowed as Firestar rested his muzzle on her head. When the clan had finished calling Leaf Dapple by her new name, Firestar raised his tail to beckon Cherry and Boris. Cherry dashed forward at once, eyes sparkling with eagerness, but Boris was hesitant, as if he realized more clearly than his sister what a massive step they were about to take. "It's time to add 2 new apprentices to the clan," Firestar mewed. "From this day forward," he began, touching Cherry on the shoulder with his tail tip, "this apprentice will be known as Cherry Paw. Sharpclaw, you have much to teach an apprentice, so you will be her mentor." Cherry Paw's head whipped around, and she stared at Sharpclaw.
Does that mean I have to do what he says?
"Yes, it does," Sandstorm replied, an edge to her voice.
Touch noses with him.
Sharp Claw stepped forward. Cherry Paw stretched out her neck, gave him a quick dab on the nose, and moved back again.
What if she doesn't do what I tell her?
Sharp Claw asked, eyeing his new apprentice.
What do I do then?
Sandstorm's eyes sparkled.
Whatever you like.
Within reason, Firestar added hastily, twitching his ears at his mate. To start with, you'd better ask me or Sandstorm if you need to punish her. We'll tell you what usually happens in our own clan. Turning to Boris, who had been listening apprehensively, he touched the young tabby on his shoulder. From this day forward, this apprentice will be known as Sparrow Paw. Leaf Dapple, you will be his mentor and share your experience with him. The newly named Sparrow Paw stepped forward to touch noses with Leaf Dapple, but for a heartbeat the she-cat held back, her eyes troubled.
I'm sorry, Firestar, but I don't think I can do this, she meowed. I'm so new to living in a clan. How can I train an apprentice properly?
Don't worry, he replied. Sandstorm and I will help you. For a while, every cat will be learning together. Relief shone in Leaf Dapple's eyes, and she stepped forward to touch noses with Sparrow Paw.
I'll do my best, she promised him.
The rest of the clan welcomed the two apprentices by calling their names, while Cherry Paw and Sparrow Paw listened with shining eyes.
What about us?
Bounce sprang to his paws from where he sat beside his mother Clovertail.
Why can't we be apprentices? We want proper clan names too,
added his sister Tiny. You can't be apprentices until you're 6 moons old, Firestar explained.
But that's ages away,
Rock complained, lashing his stumpy black tail. Firestar exchanged a glance with Sandstorm, seeing amusement glimmering in her green eyes. All right, he meowed, beckoning with his tail. Come here. You can't be apprentices yet, but you can have clan names. The 3 kits dashed toward him, falling over their own paws in their eagerness. When they stood in front of him, quivering with excitement, Firestar touched each with his tail on the top of the head. From now on, these kits will be known as Rock Kit, Bounce Kit, and Tiny Kit.
Rock Kit, Bounce Kit, Tiny Kit,
Leaf Dapple called, and the rest of the clan echoed her with warm purrs of affection. The 3 kits marched back to their mother, their tails high in the air.
What about a clan leader? Sharp Claw asked. You're not going to stay here forever, are you?
Firestar wondered if Sharp Claw was nurturing hopes of being SkyClan's new leader. He was strong, he knew the area well, and he wasn't afraid to take authority. But Firestar didn't feel confident about deciding which cat should lead the new clan. That was a job for their warrior ancestors, surely. It doesn't work like that, he told Sharp Claw. It's not my job to choose a leader. StarClan will do that. Sharp Claw's eyes narrowed, and his voice was disbelieving as he asked, How? They'll send us a sign, Firestar explained. Sharp Claw let out a snort, but didn't say any more. Now I have one more name to give, Firestar announced, relieved that the question of leadership was over for the moment. He turned to where Sky sat in the shade of the cliff. Sky, come here, please. The old cat rose to his paws and padded forward. When Sky stood in front of him, Firestar bowed his head in respect for everything the old cat had done to preserve the memory of SkyClan. I, Firestar, leader of ThunderClan and mentor to SkyClan, call upon his warrior ancestors to look down upon this cat, he meowed. He has served the warrior code throughout his life, and it is thanks to him that this clan stands here today. For that reason, I ask no promise from him, for he is already a true warrior. Sky, from this day forward, you will be known as Skywatcher, in memory of your faith and your dedication to SkyClan. A glow of delight flared in the old cat's pale eyes.
Skywatcher! Skywatcher!
Skywatcher gazed deep into Firestar's eyes.
Thank you. I never dreamed this would happen. I hope my ancestors can see me now.
I'm sure they can, Firestar told him. Drawing closer, Skywatcher murmured in his ear,
Come to my den tonight. There's something I must tell you.
Moonlight silvered the rocks as Firestar padded up the gorge. He couldn't shake off a feeling of unease, but this time it had nothing to do with sensations of hostility or a glimpse of bright, cold eyes in the undergrowth. What did the old cat want to tell him that couldn't have been said at the meeting by the rock pile? Why had he insisted on returning to his den under the tree roots instead of moving in with the clan, where he could be treated with all the respect that an elder deserved? He found the twisting path behind the boulder and began to follow it up the side of the gorge. A chill breeze ruffled his fur, a reminder that the warm days of Greenleaf must soon come to an end. As he padded up the steep path, he spotted the blur of a gray pelt beneath the thorn tree, and found Skywatcher crouching at the mouth of his den with his paws tucked under him. You asked me to come. For a few heartbeats, Skywatcher held him with eyes like deep pools of water.
I want to thank you, he meowed solemnly. You have rebuilt the lost clan.
There's no need for thanks, Firestar replied. I did only what I had to. Skywatcher nodded, blinking thoughtfully.
Do you think you have been a good leader for ThunderClan?
The question startled Firestar, and at first he wasn't sure how to reply. I don't know, he mewed at last. It hasn't been easy, but I've always tried to do what is right for my clan.
No cat would doubt your loyalty, Skywatcher agreed. But how far would it go?
Puzzled, Firestar stayed silent. Why was Skywatcher asking him about ThunderClan?
There are difficult times ahead, Skywatcher went on, and your loyalty will be tested to the utmost. Sometimes the destiny of one cat is not the destiny of the whole clan.
Firestar tipped his head to one side. Nothing Skywatcher said was making sense. Was ThunderClan in trouble? He had left them in peace, but that was several moons ago. What would happen to a leaderless clan with rivals like ShadowClan around? Skywatcher rose to his paws. His eyes blazed with reflected moonlight. For a heartbeat, Firestar was sure he could see the glitter of stars tangled in his fur. The old cat's voice was soft, but charged with power, stronger than it had been before.
Your clan is safe for now, but there will be 3 kin of your kin who hold the power of the stars in their paws.
Firestar stared at the old warrior. I don't understand. Why are you telling me this? There was no reply, except for a slight twitch of Skywatcher's ears. You must tell me more, Firestar protested. How can I decide what I should do if you don't explain? The old cat took a deep breath, but when he spoke it was only to say,
Farewell, Firestar. In seasons to come, remember me.
He waved his tail, a clear indication that Firestar should go. Firestar gazed at him helplessly for a moment longer before turning and stumbling down the path away from the den. His whole body felt cold. Skywatcher's words had the unmistakable ring of a prophecy from StarClan, but Firestar had no idea what they referred to. There will be 3 kin of your kin who hold the power of the stars in their paws. Firestar had no kin in ThunderClan except for Cloudtail, so who could the 3 be? As he approached the rock pile, listening to the unending murmur of the river, He paused and raised his eyes to Silverpelt. In the forest, the light of his warrior ancestors was a comfort to him, but he could not even be sure that they walked these strange skies.
"Can you hear me?"
he whispered.
"Blue Star, Spotted Leaf, Yellow Fang. If you are listening, please help me keep ThunderClan safe from what lies ahead."